Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Demarcus here again, talking to you about Bible prophecy. And I want to talk about the book of Revelation, specifically the sixth seal mentioned in the book of Revelation. Before I get into that, I want to invite you to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. On this channel, we like to dive deeper into the intricacies of Bible prophecy and see if there are any unanswered or even unasked questions. So whether you agree or disagree, we'd love to hear from you. All right, what's up, everybody? DeMarcus here again. This time I have a guest with me. I have Uncle James with me. How's it going?
I'm doing good. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Okay, so we're talking about the sixth seal today.
Okay.
And if you don't know, the sixth seal is in Revelation chapter 6, where it talks about all of the other seals. And James, are you familiar with the seals?
I am familiar with them to the point where I know in Revelation that they're there. I just don't remember which one is which. I know there was one about the biblical plague. There was one about the releasing of the wormwood. There was different events based on which seal an angel had opened from the scroll
Right, right,
that
right.
was given to John at the island of Patmos.
Okay, so in Revelation, just so you know, you've got three phases of judgment. You've got the seals, you've got the trumpets, and then you've got the bowls, or sometimes some interpretations may call them the vials. Same
Hmm.
thing, right?
Okay.
And so the seals are the first set of judgments. Like most of the book of Revelation, the seals come with their own mystery and debate. So, depending on what you've read or what school of thought you might ascribe to, there are any number of interpretations or conclusions that you could come to. Some see them as that which officially opens the Great Tribulation, while others kind of see them more as factors that set the stage for it. Either way, how you interpret the seals will typically have at least some additional ramifications for end of times beliefs. More on that later. So, just to kind of recap, the first seal deals with conquest. Second seal deals with war, civil unrest, etc. The third seal deals with economic fallout. The fourth seal deals with plagues and wild animals and persecution and a lot of casualties from that, and also from the war and things like that. The fifth seal deals with the persecution of the martyrs and their souls in heaven crying out for justice. So what you should notice so far is that all of the seals are building off of the previous seal or set of seals. They're both the culmination of the previous seals having been active. After the fifth seal, when the martyrs are told to rest a little while longer until a few more of their those like them have been put to death, we see something interesting happen. I'm going to read the verse that talks about the sixth seal, and then we're going to kind of unpack it. I looked when he broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood. And the stars of the sky fell to earth as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. The sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Revelation 6:12-14. So you kind of have this really apocalyptic kind of stage being set right there. And so the first set of questions that you might be able to ask is, okay, so are we talking about literal events, or are we talking, is this just symbolic language, right? Because we know that prophets tend to talk like that. They tend to exaggerate and come up with all kinds of poetic language to describe things that happen, right? So when we're looking at something like this, there's a question: should we interpret it literally, or should we interpret it symbolically? And given that the book of Revelation has so much symbolism in it, a lot of people would tend to say that, Well, these are just symbols. These are just metaphors used to kind of show the stage that's being created in that space of judgment. So is that something that you've heard before? Would you kind of lean to that side, or do you have an opinion about it at all?
So I so in the past, I used to come from, and of course, like I said, I had or if nobody knows, or I didn't say, I grew up in a Protestant evangelical community where we believed in the rapture and the coming events of the revelation. Um, and now nowadays I've kind of taken a step back to where, could there be an allegorical interpretation of these? I believe it's quite possible. But it's not something I can say for sure because there are things in the future, or let's say there's things in prophecy that have had happened that are currently maybe happening now that makes me think like, well, maybe we should
Right,
check this out, or something
right,
like that.
right, right.
I did have one question that you had read earlier about some of the other seals. Now, are these in relation to the four horsemen of the apocalypse? Because that's what kind of came up
Good,
in my
good,
mind as
good.
you
So
were reading
you're
that.
remembering. So the first four seals are the first are the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Got it.
So you've
Okay.
got the white horse, and that's my bad. I probably should have said that when I was talking about him. But you have the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and then you have the pale green horse. Right?
Got it.
Those are the
Okay.
four horsemen. Right?
And that's in reference to war, pestilence, judgment, and there was something else or a couple other things I forgot. But
Yeah, yeah. They all stand for something. And
hmm
again, like I said, the seals are debated. You got people who debate whether or not they're literal or not. Um, and then you have people that say, well, I think, for instance, with the first seal, there's some people say that that's the Antichrist. We'll kind of come back to that in a little bit, but that's one
mm-hmm.
idea that gets floated around. But
Okay.
let me kind of talk about this. If you wanted to have a literal interpretation of the sixth seal, right? Remember, let's just kind of work our way back to what I said. You've got all of these different cosmic events that come up. So you have the earthquake, sun becoming black, whole moon becoming like blood, stars falling out of the sky, sky splitting apart, and every mountain and island moved out of its place. There is a way you can look at that as a literal account of what's going to happen. So let me kind of break that down. So think about it like this: the earthquake is an earthquake, right? That
hmm
doesn't have to be any kind of symbolism about that. This earthquake is an earthquake. The
hmm
sun becoming black like sackcloth is a solar eclipse. All right.
Okay.
The moon becoming red like blood, that's a total lunar eclipse. Sometimes they will turn red during a lunar eclipse. The stars falling from the sky could be a meteor shower.
hmm
You know, so from Earth, if you were to see it like a really an exceptionally active meteor shower could, if I were an ancient person and I saw that, I might interpret it that way, as the stars falling from the sky, right? Now,
hmm
the last two things, the sky being rolled up like a scroll. Now, by itself, I kind of was like, I can't really think of what that could be. I have an interesting idea that I think you are going to like because you are kind of like a weather buff
hmm
in kind of your spare time.
Okay.
But that I put that, and then I put the mountains and the islands being moved out of their place. If you put those together in one phenomenon, it's really interesting what that could be talking about. So I'm gonna put this on the screen, but there's something called a roll cloud, and if you could, if I wish I could show this right now to you too, Jimmy, but if you could look up what's called a roll cloud, it looks almost like a sideways tornado that's up in the sky.
Oh, okay.
And so here's the deal. I'm not saying that the sky being rolled up like a scroll is just a roll cloud because roll clouds in and of themselves are pretty harmless. They happen in certain places.
hmm
But check this out. Name for me one event that could cause every mountain and island to move from their places. And because of that happening, if you look up in the sky, you might see something that looks like a bunch of roll clouds or a big, gigantic roll cloud. I have a sneaky suspicion, Jimmy, that if we're taking this literally,
Hmm.
We could be talking about what's called a geological pole shift. So you have two kinds of pole shifts. You have a magnetic pole shift, which is where the north and south pole just move.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That in and of itself is not necessarily something that you would even notice would happen. Like stuff would start messing up, birds and stuff wouldn't know where to go and all that kind of stuff, and electronics would act up, but we wouldn't necessarily notice it ourselves. But what's
Right.
called a geological pole shift is where the crust of the earth slides on top of the mantle.
Hmm.
The continents and everything move to different positions.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden, so let's take this is north and south, right? If the
Hmm.
mantle all of a sudden slid, two things would happen. All of the mountains and the islands would be in completely different places, right? They would
Hmm.
be moved out of their places. But up in the
Okay.
sky, you got to think, you got different masses of air, right? You got cold air
Mhm.
and you got warm air. So when
Right.
you talk about those roll clouds, they're formed when you have a mass of cold air that rushes into an area and it forces the warm air above it.
Hmm.
And kind of at the point where they're kind of rubbing each other, that creates that sort of roll effect. Well, just
Yeah.
imagine that on a larger scale. Imagine the whole North Pole suddenly sliding down south. I can imagine a gigantic sort of roll cloud looking thing up in the sky, which would look like the sky is being rolled up like a scroll. So there is a
Mhm.
way you can look at the sixth seal as being literal events that could happen, like exactly as it's saying. You can make the argument that he's looking at things that really will happen. What do you think of that?
Well, it's interesting you say that, from a weather phenomenon, uh, because I do tend to look at those things sometimes, and there are some events now. A pole shift is debatable because those things have happened in the past. We're talking, every 25, 50,000 years, that'll happen, where there might be a pole shift, or I forget the amount of time, but they happen sometimes. Now, whether they cause that kind of geological instability is not necessarily clear, but we do know, science does know of a couple things that do happen that can cause such phenomenon, and that could be something as simple as an asteroid.
Mhm.
If an asteroid hits the Earth, depending on where it hits, could cause a tsunami where it would seem like continents and islands are being moved. Maybe they're just being covered in water, and certain parts of it are being exposed and others are not.
Mhm.
Um, it could also, if a strong enough asteroid were to hit, it would cause a huge plume of plasma and gas into the sky, and that would effectively envelop the entire Earth,
Mhm.
as in the dinosaur extinction event.
Mhm.
Um, that could be one way.
So
Another
you're
way is
imagining kind of like the smoke from that impact kind of dissipating throughout the sky and kind of making it from the ground. It would kind of look like that smoke was like moving the sky kind of out of the way as it
right,
envelops the whole thing.
exactly. And it
Gotcha.
could shift. It could shift land masses. It definitely will cause tsunami, depending on where it hits.
Mhm.
Um, but that's not the only event that could do that. You could also have it like a caldera all of a sudden explode. We have one here in North America, the Great Pacific Northwest, which is an ancient caldera that scientists say one day, maybe not anytime soon, but one day would blow up.
Okay, now
And
explain to everybody what that is. What is a caldera?
a caldera is, to my understanding, is like a big bowl of magma that sits under the crust.
Mhm.
And right now it's stable, but given enough pressure, if something shifts or something, causes a lot of pressure, and that bowl of magma gets filled up. And if there's enough pressure, it'll pop the bowl.
Mhm.
Um,
And that's
so
supposed to be, I think there's one of those under Yellowstone, if I'm not mistaken. Because,
that's right. Yeah,
okay, because that's what they talk about. They always say that if that thing ever
yeah.
blows, then that's,
Well, it'll be bad for people here in America. That's
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, yeah.
That's something that could be powerful enough to cause, the atmosphere to be enveloped sufficiently enough, the whole atmosphere, because that it's a big caldera. It's not like a regular volcano where you get a little bit of a plume. This is big. This is
Yeah.
massive.
Right.
Um, and there's
Yeah.
also earthquakes. We had, if you remember, the 2011 Indonesian earthquake that was reported as a 9.0, and that was sufficiently strong enough that it shook the entire world. Now, if you're talking about something that's even more powerful, because the higher you go on the Richter scale, the more exponentially powerful that kinetic energy is around the world.
Right.
Talk about a 9.1, 9.5. You're talking about Earth moving, shattering,
Right, 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 right,
events.
right. And so, but so earthquakes were covered in that seal. So
Hmm.
he definitely talks about earthquakes.
Right.
I just think that when you get down to the end of that, where he's talking about the sky being rolled up like a scroll and
Hmm.
the mountains and island being moved from their place, there is that sounds, what's the word? Hyperbolic. That sounds like something that's like, well, I doubt that's literally going to happen. But I mean, hypothetically, there are geological events that could happen that could trigger something like that. But let me just
Mm.
say about the non-literal interpretation that that's a perfectly there's the people who believe in a non-literal interpretation of this particular seal. I mean, they've got some reason to think that too, because again, sometimes in the past prophets would use terminology, they would use speech like this,
Hmm.
wording like this, because they want to make sure the seriousness of the event isn't lost on the reader. They
Right.
can't necessarily
Yep.
tell you exactly what's going to happen, but they can establish the scale of it, right?
Hmm.
So if I
Right.
tell you, the stars are falling out of the sky and the moon is fleeing, that definitely that puts you in the right frame of mind of saying this is a major thing.
Hmm.
So there's an argument that the prophets are simply being hyperbolic to establish the scale of the event, but also when it talks about God's judgment, when it says that God is going to act, and then you have these major cosmic bodies such as the sun and the moon that people have always seen as great, when even they're shaken by what God is doing, that also establishes God as sovereign over all things. So
Hmm.
there is a way of looking at this as not being literal, but still nevertheless being real.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing about it is when you read verses 15 through 17, the people have a reaction to it.
John not only gives us a preview of the events contained in the seal, but also gives us a glimpse of the reaction of the people that experienced them. Then the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the commanders, and the rich, and the strong, and every slave and free man, hid themselves in caves, and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? Revelation 6:15 to 17.
Now, there's two things that I want to point out. Number one, even if John was being hyperbolic, there's still some kind of an event that's embedded in that seal because people are having a reaction. People are not going to react to
Yeah.
hyperbole, right? Something they
Hmm.
had to have witnessed something happening to where their reaction is to become terrified and to flee and to try and hide. So I want to
Hmm.
establish that first. Interesting thing though, I don't know if you know this. Do you know that there are the ultra wealthy,
Hmm.
especially them, are building what they call doomsday bunkers? And these are literal underground bunkers inside of mountains or out in the middle of nowhere, where in
Hmm.
case of civil unrest or societal collapse or some sort of end of the world apocalyptic kind of event, they would go and flee and hide into those places.
Hmm.
And so it's
Yeah.
funny, thousands of years ago, John foresaw an event happening, and the powers that be and the wealthy had this reaction to go and hide underground. And we
Hmm.
see them actually preparing for that right now. I just thought that was interesting. But what I notice is that the sixth seal, it establishes two set of criteria. And we're kind of getting
Mhm.
short on time, so I'm gonna make this quick. The
Okay.
first set of criteria is that it's an apocalyptic event. Okay,
Mhm.
whether the things mentioned are literally going to happen or not, or whether there's another event that they're just a symbol for, something happens that terrifies people. Number one. Number
Mhm.
two, they're able to uh, associate it specifically with God and Jesus Christ because it says,
Mhm.
hide us from the wrath of the Lamb. Now you have to think about this. Why would non believers associate anything with Jesus Christ? Because think about it. If you like dystopian movies, if you like apocalyptic literature, you know
Mhm.
that humanity is no stranger to coming up with ways to end the world. I mean, you got your zombie apocalypses, you got your meteors hitting the earth, you got AI robots taking over everybody in Terminator and the
Mhm.
Matrix. You've
Yeah.
got, all kinds of different movies that come out to talk about the end of the world. None of those things happening would make a person say, yeah, Jesus Christ did that. There's nothing specifically Christian about those events to make a person react like that. So,
Mhm.
whatever the event is, it has to be sufficiently associated with Christianity to where not only would it terrify everybody, there would at least be some people who would say, yeah, this has something to do with Jesus Christ. Okay.
Mhm.
And like I said, none of those other apocalyptic events do it, but there's only one event that satisfies both criteria. And I want to see if you can guess what it is. What do you think I'm going to say it is? It's it's
Go ahead.
terrifying and it's uniquely Christian.
Right. Okay. So it says that the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb.
Right. So we're talking about Christ.
Right.
What
Because he's the only
event?
one in the Bible that's linked to the Lamb as being linked to Jesus Christ. That's clear. Yes.
No, I'm saying what event do you think if it were to happen, it would
Mhm.
cause enough chaos and panic to satisfy where the verses describe everybody as being terrified. It would
Right.
cause that amount of panic, in other words. So it can do that.
Okay.
And if it happens, there would be people who would think it had something to do with Jesus Christ. What's that one event
Well,
outside of
depending
him
on what,
just coming down in a second coming?
right,
What's the only other event?
a pre-rapture tribulation or pre-rapture.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go. That's exactly what I was going to talk about. So the
Right.
question is, does the sixth seal is the event hidden in the sixth seal? Is it the rapture? Because if you think about it, we have rapture verses like John 14, 1 Thessalonians 4,
Mhm.
where it describes the rapture from our perspective. But I always wondered, where in the Bible is the perspective of the people who aren't raptured? Like, if it were to
Mhm.
happen, we would expect to see some kind of reaction on the part of the people who didn't get raptured.
Mhm.
The sixth seal fits the other side of the coin, the perspective of the people who didn't get raptured. So the people who are observing the event, they're
Mhm.
anticipating the wrath of the Lamb. It hasn't necessarily happened yet, but they're whatever this event was, it's sending them a signal that the wrath is coming, right?
Right.
So, and that was my question: is the event that they witnessed that made them think that is that the rapture? I think now we can go into the pros and cons of why it may or may not actually be, but they saw something that was
Mhm.
terrifying. It made people go and flee and hide. So I think that there's, like I said, there are some reasons that there's some objections to saying that this is the rapture, and I can
Mhm.
already kind of go through them. But it definitely fits right there because you have to ask yourself, why would an unbeliever, if it was any other cataclysmic event, why would they ever say hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne? Why would an
Mhm.
atheist ever say that?
Mhm.
Right? They don't believe in him. So
Yeah.
an asteroid hitting the earth and causing, worldwide, catastrophe is not going to make them say, hide us from the wrath of the Lamb. It's not going to turn a hardcore non-believer into a believer all of a sudden. But something that only Christians had been talking about before happening,
Mm.
and something that only Christians experienced. So only Christians were raptured, right? None of your devout Buddhists are gone. None of your devout Muslims are gone. None of your devout whatever are gone. It's only devout Christians and people who, at some time in their life put their faith in Jesus Christ as their savior. Those are the only ones who are gone. Maybe some of them weren't perfect people, you know what I mean? So it's not like they're all like perfect example of righteousness, but it's not like it was a random event. It's something that seems to have been targeted. So I think that would make people who had heard of the rapture before, it would make at least those people say, "Oh man, my cousin used to tell me about this, that this was going to
Mm.
happen, and I didn't believe it." But
Or my grandpa, my
so,
granny used to talk about it all the time. Yeah.
right, and so
Mhm.
and now they're gone, so it must
Yeah.
have been real. And now that they see that it must have been real, their natural reaction would be terror because, like, what's going to happen now? So I think it
Mhm.
fits. So do
Okay.
you want me to go into some of the pros and cons of that interpretation, though?
Yeah, let's hit it.
Okay, so let me start with the cons because we've been talking about the pros.
Okay.
Now, so there are two different camps. There are really three, but I kick out the post-trib people. I just don't think there's anything to that. Um, you have what they call pre-trib rapture people, and
Mhm.
then you have what they call pre-wrath rapture. It's kind of like
Mhm.
back in the day they used to call it mid-trib rapture. You remember that one? The people that
Mhm.
believe that the
Yep.
rapture was in the middle. So
Yeah.
now there's this term that's come out that's called pre-wrath rapture. I don't know,
Mhm.
when it came out, but I never used to hear that back in the 90s, back when we were all into Perry Stone and Jack Van Impe and all them.
Mhm. Yeah.
But so it turns out if you believe in if you think the seals are the start of the tribulation and you believe in a pre-trib rapture, you're probably not going to think that the sixth seal hides the rapture. Because if the opening of the first seal starts the tribulation, that means the rapture had to have already happened, right?
So let me ask you a question. The bowls that you mentioned before
Mm.
and the trumpets
That's
that are
after.
sounded, those are
That-
after.
That's
Okay. So
after.
the
That's after.
seal, which starts these particular events. Okay.
Right.
All right.
So if your interpretation of the seals is that there are people who say from the time that first seal is broken, that's when the tribulation starts. If you take that
Hmm.
view and you believe in a pre-trib rapture, you're probably not going to believe that the fifth seal has anything to do with the rapture because you're going to believe that it's already happened. Now,
Yeah.
if you believe that the seals start the tribulation, but you believe in a pre-wrath rapture, then the rapture could still fit there because
Hmm.
people who believe in a pre-wrath rapture, they believe that we're going to go through some portion of the tribulation. It's just that before God actually throws down his wrath, we'll be
Hmm.
taken out. Okay. Now, here's the thing. If you don't think that the seals start the tribulation, there's a view that says that the seals are not part of the tribulation. They just kind of set the stage for it. They set the conditions up for the tribulation to happen. So they're
Hmm.
actually before the tribulation starts. Okay. If you look at it that way, it's possible for the rapture to be at the sixth seal and still be a pre-trib rapture because the seals are supposed to be something
Hmm.
that happened prior to the rapture. So there are different ways you can look at it and
Hmm.
make it either
Yeah.
work or not work. So again, I'm a
S-
pre-trib rapture kind of person.
mhm.
So you would have to prove to me that the seals don't happen before the tribulation in order for me to say that
Mhm.
it's absolute for me to kick out the idea that the
Yeah.
rapture is in the sixth seal.
Okay. So, what would you say then to? people who, or I mean, it depends on who you talk to, because as far as the post-tribulation individuals, and you said that I don't believe in that, but there's a big swath of denominations out there that do believe in that, like fundamental Baptist, Seventh-day Adventist, in other words, to name a few, that hold that rapture of the church will occur at the conclusion of the tribulation period, coinciding the public physical return of Jesus Christ. You see what I'm saying? So what would you say that you would disagree with that? Like, what is your evidence,
Why would I
biblical
throw that
evidence or
out?
scripture?
Okay, so I would look at it like this. There are only two, well, I won't say only two, but the two go-to passages that pretty much nobody disagrees are about the rapture are John 14, 1 through 3, and 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 and 17, I want to say. As a matter of fact, I did a video where I said that 1 Thessalonians 4, Paul's verse there, is really just an elaboration of what Jesus said in John 1:14, and John 14, 1 through 3. In John 14, Jesus says, and if you remember, and I can pull it up here, he said, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you?" Now, that's the key phrase right there. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. So the place that he's preparing for us is not here, but there. And he says, "And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may always be where I am." Okay. So if you really look at that, Jesus in that verse is talking about going somewhere, preparing a place for us, coming back, getting us, and then taking us back there. Well, if you look at the end of the tribulation, Jesus is not coming and then leaving again. When he comes back at the end of the tribulation, he's staying here. He's staying on earth. So if Jesus is ever going to come and get us and take us somewhere, it has to be before then. It can't be at the end of the tribulation, because he's not going anywhere then. So that's why I say that to me, just Jesus' statement in John 14 in and of itself kind of kicks that whole idea out, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because and let me just specifically say, it kicks it out, in my opinion, because it does not leave any room for Jesus to do what he said he was going to do. He can't take us anywhere if he's not going anywhere.